Okay. How would you evaluate the lesson plans you reviewed? If you were the substitute, would you be able to implement these lessons plans based on how they were written?
Well,
I feel like we haven't even talked about our lesson plans yet, so
Well,
yeah.
I had like one lesson plan that I thought like was actually like a thorough lesson plan. It had detail. It had like what if you had these kids. It broke down the 3 of her classes that she had.
oh, I think I did the same one. Yeah, that one was good.
Yeah. The other ones I was just like, what the heck? Like these
Yeah,
are horrible.
there were some that were so vague, and I'm like, that's not gonna help anything.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. Or they didn't have enough representations, and it was like,
Yeah.
well, that's a good idea for like everybody that can focus on reading, but what about your
Yeah.
students that, you know?
Yeah.
Like one of mine literally had like a website they just clicked on and would read the article. And I was like, what? What?
Two of mine had spelling errors.
Oh, really?
That's weird.
Yeah. I was like,
That's
what?
It had what?
Spelling errors.
Oh yeah. So did mine actually.
What the heck?
That's
You'd think they would
Maybe I
edit
wasn't
that.
paying that close attention.
Right?
Okay.
Well, to go off the substitute part, I think there's some parts of it that would be easy for the substitute to follow. But I think, again, that vagueness comes in. And like I was a substitute for a year, and I had some lesson plans that were very vague and didn't help me at all. And it was really frustrating. And so I would end up just improvising and implementing something that.
It's also hard though when you have like such a thorough lesson plan, you know, because like what if you don't follow that?
Yeah.
Having like some type of lenience is nice. Like substitutes of what you could do if you didn't have enough time just to fall back on. But
Yeah.
I think that like detail is important as long as it's flexible.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of the ones I looked at were vague, and I don't think that any of them would help a sub out because it was kind of like vague and it didn't say when to do this or when to do that. And I don't know. I just don't think it'd be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. What did you learn about UDL by reviewing these lesson plans?
Not all of them are UDL.
Yeah.
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 Only one of mine was, I think.
Really, yeah.
Mine
Lot of-
some of them had portions of UDL, but they weren't like fully accessible for everybody. Like they've had a good start, but they didn't quite reach the mark, I don't think.
Yeah. I also noticed on a lot of the lesson plans that a lot of them didn't even have standards like linked with them. I didn't choose those ones obviously, but it was just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, none of mine had standards linked with them except the fact that it linked me to it, but it didn't like specify like
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like weird also that like the first one I looked at like had like a hook, it had an introduction, it had a beginning, middle, and end, and it had a closing, it had like a post-assessment and a pre-assessment, and like others like literally had like maybe 1 or 2 of those.
Yeah. I think it's hard to follow UDL a lot of the times too, especially because I felt like some of the lessons rushed. And so I feel like they didn't pay attention to detail as much, and it got like kind of hard and confusing to follow UDL guidelines for a lot of them.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to follow them.
And like sometimes like teachers like aren't in the mindset of making it work for everyone, you know, like they just like plan something super quick. So it can be difficult if you don't put in the same time.
Yeah, and like all these teachers already know their students, so maybe they just do it for their students specifically, but I don't know.
It's true.
Yeah.
All right. Let's share.
Sounds good. I'll go first. My literacy and reading one was about the Holocaust, and it took they were learning about the Holocaust and World War II and Nazis in their social studies. So she was implementing it into their reading. And so they had to read a book called Number the Stars. And I read it a long time ago, so I don't remember what it's about. And so like she would have them be reading it in class, and before they would read it, she would do like vocabulary words on the boards that when they came across it in the book, they would know what it means. And then she would pair stronger students with struggling students and make them partners. So I liked that because then they could help each other. But sometimes that doesn't always work because sometimes the stronger student doesn't really help the student. They just do it all. So that could have its pros and cons. And then she would ask leading questions while they were reading, help them really think about what it would be like to live like that, or they were really focusing on that good versus evil aspect. And then at the end of after they finished reading, they had to get 2 pieces of paper and make their own little book. And it had specific instructions on how to do it. And you had to put like what you learned, the facts from World War II versus the book and how they worked together, how they were different, and your personal view of the book. And I think it was good, but it wasn't. I thought it was the weakest example of UDL because like her materials were just the book for each student. There was no like reading to text, like being able to listen to it. Like she just had the text available, and there was no other, like if you had a student that couldn't write or had a hard time with those motor skills, there was no alternate assignment for them. So I just think that she really missed the mark on a bunch. I mean, again, she could know her students and they might not have those needs, but what if she did? Or what if somebody was looking at this hoping for help and they didn't have all those needs? The other one, my writing one, I really liked. So it was talking about how to write a story with the beginning, middle, and end, but then also adding all the different aspects of writing. And she broke down each objective really well, I thought, so the students knew what they were supposed to be doing. And then she retaught or taught what she wanted them to do. And she broke it down into like mini lessons. So it wasn't just one lesson. It broke down every day, like learning something about writing and then putting it together, which I thought was really nice. She used Brain Pop videos to show different aspects of writing. She used Prezi, modeling. She asked leading questions. She used graphic organizers. She gave direct instruction to struggling students. And I just thought she did really well with breaking it down and having a bunch of different forms of representation. So I thought that was one of the stronger versions of UDL that I read in the lessons. The math, it was order of operations, and I think that's the one that was yeah. And it was really that was my favorite. I thought that was
mine too.
Yeah, because she has these 3 different classes. In the first class, there's like a certain amount of kids on IEPs and 504s. There was a lot of them, so that class needed more of the representation in different forms, and she used it really well and broke it down. Then the second group, there was some kids on 504s. And then the third group was pretty much like excelling students that needed a little bit more challenge. And so she focused on each group specifically, and I thought that was really cool. And one of the things that I really liked that she did was in the first group with all the IUPs and 504s, she would get like the lesson going, and then she would pull aside the kids with the IEPs into a small group session. And I thought that was awesome. She was like really making sure that all students were there to succeed and understand. And she had so many different forms of representation, and her lesson was very specific and down, and it was good. I liked it. And then the other math one that I did was about how to understand percents and how to calculate percents. And the teacher first started out with breaking down what a percent is and what it would look like in the real world and why you would use it. And so I like that she brought that in first, so it wasn't just, now let's figure out how to calculate percents. She really wanted them to understand why they did it. So she used Prezi for that too, and also the Brain Pop videos as well. She would show them a video and then they would talk about it and use real world examples. And then she taught about how to calculate, and she would use like those leading questions again, and had lots of different forms of representation. And I think there was more forms of representation that she could have used, like with modeling and different manipulatives that she didn't really use effectively. But I like that she broke it down. I still thought it was more effective than some of the other ones that I read. So yeah, the end.
Wait. Okay. So just a brief over. I had that same math one. Something that kind of just stuck out to me. Everything you said, I'm agreeing with. I like how she started the lesson with examples, kind of just to get them hooked into it. So her first one was like a cartoon character, and she did like how she stacked her groceries and stuff, and when she got home, her eggs were broke. So she was just saying like, because they were doing PEMDAS, and she was saying like, there's a certain way that you need to do things sometimes. And then I liked how she also did the PB. She did a PB&J sandwich.
Oh,
She
yeah.
had the kids tell her about like what she should do. So I just think that's important to like really engage your students, like giving them examples so that they can relate to, because they're more likely to pay attention to PEMDAS and find a connection. Like, oh, PEMDAS, yeah, I remember like that PB&J example, you know. So I just found that kind of interesting to build off everything that you said. It was my best lesson, just because it was very descriptive. I had a lot of detail of what would happen if she had, like since she had kids that were on those 504s and IEPs, what she does for them. She had like her assessments were thorough. So just everything that you want to look for in a lesson plan, basically. That was the best one that I looked at.
Yeah.
The next one was my literacy and writing. This was like terrible. This is the worst lesson plan I've ever looked at. It was like an article called The Sun and the Moon, and literally the kids would just click on it like I was telling you, and then they would go and read it, and it was kind of like at their own pace. They could watch a video on it if they didn't want to read it, or they struggled to read or whatever, but there was like no, like what would happen if you had a kid that couldn't read, you know, or like just like no substitutes for this activity. It wasn't detailed. It was literally just no direction. So I would not use that. My next math one, this was like another kind of crummy one. She had the kids working on like solving variables and stuff, and she just like basically gave them a worksheet, like a pre-assessment before, and then she broke them up into groups. Then they worked on a worksheet, and then each group presented like a problem to the class, and then as their ticket to go, they had to like answer a question. And I just thought it was like, it's probably in the middle of a lesson, truthfully, like a big lesson plan. They're just practicing these skills. That's kind of what I interpreted it as. And maybe that's why it wasn't as detailed and didn't meet so much all of the UDL requirements, you know? So maybe that was an issue, but I liked how she did do group work because they could have that co-teaching. And that was a strong aspect, I guess, but you can always have those people that don't like group work. And then my last one was, this was a silly one too. I feel like I only had one like good one, you know, but so this one was to help kids write short descriptive texts. And so to like kind of get the class started, she played like the Pump It Up song, and she would like play it. You could play it in like the middle of class to get the kids motivated. And then she had like a PowerPoint about the 5 different strategies that you use for revising and enhancing writing. And this part was actually pretty cool. She used like a 5-finger strategy, like where you could like a glove basically. And she had like each strategy on a finger. And so then you could like break it down into simpler terms. So like numbers, names, descriptive words, better word choice, and comparison. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then she had the baby. Sorry. She had the kids break up into pairs, and they then wrote their own. So it was just like iffy. I think it could use some improvement to meet the UDL needs. But that's all.
Okay. So for my first one, I chose this one. It was for primarily for ESL students, and they're working on learning American English idioms. And so it started out by using the different methods of learning idioms, and they will point them out in a conversation and in reading, and so they get like multiple terms of it. And they'll also read the idioms and write them and explain them in their own definitions, and it will help them practice them so they can use them when they're talking to people, so it's like more natural. And then for the assessment part of it, the students were asked to explain what an idiom was. That one was really vague, and so it didn't really have a whole lot of like structure to it. And so then for my second one, so this one was the students were able to understand the relationship between like squares and shapes and like the areas with them. And they'll be identifying like squares and how to find the area for the square, and they would be doing it in person, like on like hands-on, or on Chromebooks. There was like a software and just a bunch of things for it, and they could also do it on worksheets, and so it gave them like a lot of different ways to do it. And then for the formative assessment for that one, the teacher would just be observing the students and while teaching and doing the independent work and asking questions. And there wasn't really like formal assessment, but that works. And then for my third one, all right, so students were predicting how like movement works, and so they'd be using like hard evidence to predict. So they were doing like some experiments, and they were able to explain the effects that air resistance makes on the motion of different objects. And so they were basically just demonstrating the movement of certain objects. Like they'd be using something heavier, something lighter, and see how it would work, and different kind of air pressure. And the assessment was kind of the same. It was like observations, questioning, discussion, and then there was a lot of visual representations as well. Like the teacher like showed it with like a few different objects, and then there was also like PowerPoints, and she also used a Prezi actually. All right, and my last one, this is actually my favorite one. The students, like it's with states of matter, and so they're able to see that there's 3 states, so liquid, solid, gas, and they're able to identify them and explain what conditions are needed for these. And there was obviously representation of the 3 and just showing how they got to that state and how they can change, I guess. And basically just making connections between like temperature and effect of the state of matter. And I liked it because there was a lot of like explanation about it and a lot of experiments. The teacher showed a lot of things, and they were able to do it like hands-on. I thought that was good. And so the most effective I thought was the last one, because like it shows how we use the informations of the states of matter. Like we use it all the time, like for weather or anything like cooking. And so I think it's just important to know. And I thought the least effective was like the areas of squared and other objects. It was really vague, and I wouldn't ever use it because, I don't know, it didn't really get the point across. It was really unclear. And so, yeah, that's it.
Nice. Okay, the first one I did was but it was literacy is what the Common Core standard was. And so it was for students to be able to conduct an experiment and be able to like record the data and collect data down. Basically, the teacher introduced the scientific method by showing them a Bill Nye video to kind of like get their attention, which I thought was cool because that brings me back to my elementary days. And then she gave them like a template with the scientific method like on it, and they got to choose from one of 3 experiments. Like the first one was really easy, the second one was kind of hard, and then the third one was like higher level thinking. And so the students got to choose, and it's like a 20-minute experiment was all. They had to go through and do the scientific method and like write it all down. And she, at the end, she did like a review game to see if they knew the scientific method. And then a summative assessment was when later that week they had another experiment that they had to do on their own, like without the teacher walking around and helping them or anything. So then the second one I did was science, and it was also a literacy standard. And it was students were growing a plant, so they got to learn the different parts of a plant. Ouch. And a plant and like identify and draw everything. And so they identified the photosynthesis cycle. They looked at like where plants are. She, like at the beginning, she asked them if they had any plants in their house or what kind of foods they ate that they thought were plants and stuff like that. And she showed them a PowerPoint kind of just showing what photosynthesis was and how a plant grows. And then she got a couple packages of seeds, and the students got to pick which they wanted to grow, and then they grew it over a course of like 4 weeks, I think. And so I thought that was really also had a lot of different ways of like showing them how plants grow. Like she had interactive stuff on the iPad, she had the PowerPoint, she had videos, and then throughout the thing, they were formatively like measuring and recording observations of their plants and comparing and contrasting their plants to everybody else's plants. And I liked this lesson was the most effective. It was written out really vague, but I think that was kind of the point because each plant grows at a different rate. And like she brought in the fact that everybody learns differently and there's multiple ways of representation and showing them how it works and all of this other stuff. And they also brought math into it to where they had to measure it and measure how much it had grown over the course and every week and stuff. Then the second one I did, or the third one, was subtraction for math. And she brought in a big bag of candy. It was around Halloween time. And she pulled out 15 pieces and gave away 7 and then asked how many pieces were left. And then she introduced like the fact of subtraction, and she continues to give like a whole bunch of different examples. And then she gives each like table 5 problems to solve as a group. And then when they're done and they make sure that they understand everything, she gave them a worksheet to take home for homework. And I didn't really like that one just because there wasn't any multiple ways of representation. There was nothing. Like she brought in a bag of candy, showed them how many she took away, and she wrote a couple on the board and showed them how to do it, and then that was it. So I didn't really like that one. And then the last one was money. So she brought in a big jar of coins, and she walked around and passed out one of each coin to each student and explained the coins, how much they were worth. And then she showed like a PowerPoint and had them like take notes on it. And then she took all the coins back and gave them a worksheet to see how much they had learned. And then depending on what they had learned, she was going to model the rest of her lesson around it. And so because in the lesson they all like understood it fairly well, she gave them the coins to mess around with and gave like dollar amounts on the board for them to make out of the coins as a group. And when they were done with $1 amount, they would raise their hand and she would go check it. And then she gave them the remainder of class to work just like with the coins and hang out with them. So yeah, that was it.
Awesome.
Summaries?
All right. So I think it's always good to talk about like the different lesson plans that you guys read and be able to see what we just think are good ideas and not good ideas and what we think will work and what won't work, and how to tweak those things. Because that's what I was doing while I was reading the lessons is I was thinking about, well, I could improve this lesson by adding this or adding this. And I think that that's obviously what this class is about, is to help us understand those different UDLs and how to implement it into our own classroom so that we're one step closer to being better teachers and helping not just most of our students, but all of our students. And yeah, it's just always good to talk to you guys and get my ideas out there and to listen to your guys' ideas. And it really expands my knowledge already. So.
I think that this is a really big eye opener to what a good lesson should look like. Clearly, I found just, in my opinion, I found just one really good lesson plan that I would potentially use in my own classroom, you know, like depending on what we do, you know, but it's good to see this because we have our next delivery soon on our lesson plan. And so it's just good to say, like, either reassure or think about the things that I could fix. So I just think it's like just a big eye opener to what a good lesson is. That was a big takeaway for me.
Yeah, for sure.
That's all.
All right. Sorry. Okay, so I think, well, obviously, I just like hearing all the lesson plans, and I think it's crazy. I love that website because there's so many, and it just like is such a good resource for everyone, I think. Yeah. And my favorite was obviously the order of operations. I feel like that was everyone's favorite, and I just thought it was really well explained. And yeah, I just think it was funny how vague some of the lesson plans were, but like how Shay said earlier, like maybe that's the point, like it should be vague. And so I don't know, thinking about that, it's like makes more sense. And yeah, I like the point when we talked about the sub, like would we give this to a sub, and if we were a sub, would it make sense? And like I feel like that's something we really need to think about, because like if it doesn't make sense to sub, then nothing's gonna get done. I might as well just not have had school. I don't know, just something to think about. But yeah, that's it.
I like Roper. I like hearing all the different lesson plans. It's always, I don't know, I think it's good to hear like how different teachers do different things and like what's good and what's bad about them. It kind of shows us what we should and shouldn't do when we become teachers. And then I thought it was kind of funny to see how bad some of the lesson plans were. Like,
Yeah.
I can't believe the teachers actually are like teaching kids this stuff and like doing this in their classroom, and it doesn't, like, it wouldn't have worked for me when I was that age. So I'm curious to see how it works for them. And then all of my lesson plans had like so many standards in one.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the science ones. They had like literacy, math, science, like a whole bunch of different stuff. And so I thought that was kind of interesting too. And then all you guys said too, it's nice to see how we would change things and how like a substitute would be that if we don't look at it that way, our lesson plans are never going to be very good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're good.
All right. I'm going to end it.
All right.